Okay, recording is started. And before I share the screen, let me just me make an introduction. And actually, I am planning to teach in physical presence, but of course it depends on your attendance at the lectures. So just be aware that if you want to physically attend in the future, you just have to book on the present.unibo.it. And if I have even only one student, I am planning to come in Ravenna to teach in physical presence. Of course, if you book, please make sure that you indeed attend in physical presence. Probably it's not your case. I'm not even sure if you are in Ravenna now. But just keep in mind that if I don't have students in the room, then I'll teach online, because it's also easier for me to teach from my office. If I get students in the room, I have no problem. The timing of the lectures. The timing, I am planning to start any lecture at 2 p.m. Today I was late, sorry for that, but I am planning to start at 2 p.m. We have 4 hours, which means that I am planning to teach to make a break after 2 hours. So the timing would be 2 p.m., 3:30 p.m., and then 15 minutes break. And then from 3:45 to 5:15. Today, I will postpone everything about 10 minutes. So we will finish at about 5:25. It's not a big deal. And the same thing if in the future I'll come in Ravenna to attend to give lectures in physical presence, same timing. Just be aware that I will also dedicate part of the hours to make exercises, practical exercises, and therefore I will tell you in advance. So there will be some lectures where actually I will not lecture for 4 hours. I will lecture for a couple of hours, and then I'll dedicate the second part of the lecture to resolving some practical exercises by using open source software. Okay, I think once I clarified the timing, let me just share my screen and let me go on my website, which is here. So I make a reference to my website for exchanging tutorial documents with the students and to exchange informations like information on the course, etc. Of course, you have also the possibility to contact me if you need any information. I just want to tell you that my main channel of communication is the website. Why is that? Because I could also use the Moodle platform of the University of Bologna, indeed. And just let me open it, because I just want to, or let me just do like this. I just want to show you that everything is also there. So virtuale.unibo.it. Here we are. So if I go into it, I log in and I get a screen that is similar to yours. Here there is the page of Arbor Engineering, which is here. So basically here you find more or less the same information. I would say that on Moodle there is something more, because there are some also, there is some room dedicated, for instance, to announcements. So when I will need to make announcements, I will use this communication channel, because if I write a post in the forum here, you get an email alerting you that you received a message. But for the point of view of the tutorials and the information that I deliver to you, this website on virtuale.unibo.it is a mirror of my website. In Virtuale, if you click on, for instance, the first lectures, like, no, let's click on the first link, guidelines for a successful learning. Then there is another link, open the web page on the teacher's website. So Virtuale brings back to my personal website. So what is the reason why I put the information and the tutorials on my website and not in Virtuale? The reason is that my website is open to the world. I am a fan and a supporter of open education, open research, open science, open software, and I really prefer that everything that I teach is available to everybody. This is also useful for you because Virtuale is accessible to you only until you are a student of the University of Bologna. When you will be not a student anymore, you will not have access to Virtuale anymore. My website will remain accessible to you. And this is the first motivation, which is the main one. Another motivation is flexibility. In my website, I don't have the security requirements of the university, and therefore I can include also material that in the university website wouldn't be allowed for security reasons. So if I want to have with you some kind of digital interaction that wouldn't be allowed in Moodle, Moodle is the name of the platform that is in Virtuale, by the way. So if I don't have this opportunity in Moodle, I can get this opportunity in my website. So this is why let's make reference to my website here. My website is basically divided into two columns, as you see here. It will be updated sooner or later, but the general structure will remain the same. And there is, let me turn on the English. There is the left part is dedicated to teaching and the right part is dedicated to research. If you are curious about my research activity, just look at the right column if you want to get any information. We are interested in teaching, of course. I will give you later some information on my research activities. But let's click on the page of Arbor Engineering. You see that the second link here is tutorials of Arbor Engineering. And if you click here, just 1 second, because I have these pop-ups from the email provider. The email, let me, okay, do this. Perfect. So I don't get the pop-ups anymore. Now, this is the web page dedicated to our course. So you see, and let me log out so you get the same thing that I am getting. Okay, tutorials of Arbor Engineering 2022. First of all, it gives to you this page all the information that you need to attend the course with a profitable result, and it is very synthetic. I am now making a summary. So I will dedicate the first half hour of this lecture today to make a summary of how the course will be organized, how you may interact with me, how the exam will be done. So I make reference to this web page. I will scroll down to make sure that I don't forget anything and you get discussed by me everything you need. First of all, what is the purpose? Arbor Engineering, the name speaks for the content, and it's dedicated to the study and the discussion of techniques for designing harbors. Harbors are located along the coasts, and therefore we will also discuss, we will make an introduction about coasts, the value of coasts, including harbors. Harbors, as I said, are specific part of the coasts which are dedicated to the docking of ships, exchange of commercial goods, etc. Arbor engineering, design of harbors is a topic that is gaining increasing attention today. It is a very classical topic, let me say, because of course harbors have been a fundamental means for promoting commercial activities, connections, and therefore societal developments since a long time ago. We know that also the Romans were traveling along the Mediterranean with ships. So, I mean, it is a very traditional discipline. Today is emerging as a very I would say, a very topical issue, Arbor engineering, because we have recently additional needs related to Arbor design with respect to the past. And these needs are related to environmental protection, to optimization of logistic, because in harbors we don't have much space, and therefore, given that the traffic is increasing and increasing, we need to optimize the management and the use of harbors, and therefore logistics comes into play. And moreover, there is a great attention to harbors today because there is a corresponding increasing attention on the seas and the oceans, preserving their quality and making sure that what we do along the seas is sustainable. Just let me, I wanted to have a look at the chat. Okay, very good. I'm not looking at the chat continuously, so if you have any question, please step in. You are alone, so this is not a problem. So, for this reason, Arbor engineering is becoming an interesting issue, and it is a discipline that is relatively not popular, meaning that we have a few experts only dealing with Arbor design, because this is a very sectorial part of engineering. Still, I think Arbor engineering, precisely for this reason, is a good opportunity. It's a good opportunity because it's a discipline that it's not really well known, and especially in light of the many changes that took place in recent times. The purpose of this course is to provide an overview of techniques for the design of harbors. We will not go into deep detail because it's a discipline that it's much expanded, despite the fact that it's not very popular. It's really it is taking a wide perspective, and as we will see, an interdisciplinary perspective. We will focus on specific topics which are those which I think are more important for the design of harbors. I will try to keep it simple because I think that the important thing that you have to learn is an overview of the concepts, an overview of the tools, an overview of the problems, so that you can easily expand in your future career basing on what your needs will be. I will also consider the impact of climate change. We will discuss also about that because indeed it's becoming a very important issue in engineering design in any, I would say, in any field of engineering, but in particular, with respect to harbor engineering, climate change is playing an essential role. There is much attention on the impact of climate change on coasts, harbors, and beach geomorphodynamics in general. I am trying in my teaching to be very interactive. Of course, it's not easy with a virtual attendance, but I am trying to propose to the students forms of interactions in order to stimulate a discussion between us. I started already 10 years ago to make videos of my lectures available, and they will be available on YouTube and also in Virtuale, in Panopto. I use two channels to make the videos available. They are replicas. I put the same video available on Panopto and on YouTube. The reason why I also want YouTube is precisely openness. YouTube is accessible to everybody. I started already 10 years ago. At the time, it was innovative, an innovative idea. Today, of course, it's not innovative anymore, but I am continuing, and I firmly believe that the videos are much, much helpful. Another thing that I tried in the past with very good results was to invite the students to deliver short presentations, maybe on topics which are not taught in my lectures, but are relevant to Arbor engineering and may be interesting from a technical point of view. Typically, students delivered presentations related to port design in their country, or problems related to port management and port maintenance in their countries. These are short presentations, like 5-8 slides, in order to present a problem, in order to present solutions, according to the interest of the students. It is a very good idea, provided there is an audience, so we will see whether this is possible this year, because of course, if you are only a couple of students attending remotely, it's probably not really a productive experience. But if there will be more students, even remotely, I will invite you to deliver short presentations, of course, if you want. And the advantage may be that if your presentation is good, and only if it's good, I can take into account the fact that you gave the presentation to form my judgment for the final exam. The exam, I will tell you later how it's structured, but it's an oral examination with questions, and I can make it shorter if you delivered a successful presentation. What is the advantage in giving a presentation? I think it is very useful for you because it is a kind of training for delivering other presentations which will be probably more formal and more important in your career and life. For instance, when you will take your degree, your master degree, you will have to deliver a presentation of a summary of your thesis. And when you will look for a job, you will have to present something at an interview. So indeed, learning how to successfully speak is an asset. It's a skill that it's becoming more and more important these days. So I think that this could be for you a useful experience with no risk, and it's also interesting to see what are the problems in different contexts. Diversity of cultures means that we can learn from different perspectives, different solutions, different ways of approaching a problem, an engineering problem. And this is another motivation for trying to share our reciprocal experiences. Keep in mind, and I will tell you something later, that I'm not an Arbor engineer. I am making research in hydrology, and I'm not doing any research in Arbor engineering. And of course, I am an expert in Arbor engineering because I studied it. But I don't have a research experience in that. So, I mean, it happened to me during these years, because it's already quite a few years that I'm teaching Arbor engineering, that I learned from the students. I learned from their perspective. I hope they learned also from me, but I can say that this interaction, if we succeed, would be really a positive thing for you and also for me. And maybe that I will ask you also within the framework of this interactivity to fill a form in order to express your opinion on my teaching, an anonymous form. You know that at the end of the course you will have the opportunity to fill a form on your level of satisfaction of my teaching, but at the end of the lecture it's too late to make changes, to introduce to correct the way I am teaching. So maybe that I ask you also to fill the form in the midterm. Now, the tutorial documents, I think this is an essential information for you. My tutorial documents are given in the form of web pages. Why I use web pages and not PDFs, for instance? First, because I want to use links and I want to continuously update the web pages. At the bottom of each web page, you see the date of the last change. You will see that the dates usually are quite recent because I am evolving my material. And if the material is online, I think it is easier to get the new version known. And also, as I said, it's easier for you when you study to follow the links, and for me when I teach to follow the links. So basically, if you need a PDF of my web pages, it's not a problem, you can print it out. But what I suggest to you, as long as you have a good connection, or as long as you indeed you like to follow the links that I am presenting in the web pages, what I'm suggesting to you is that you read online. My website is not yet mobile friendly, but you can easily read on a PC or a tablet. Some students reported to me that also on the mobile this is possible, but still I think that it's not really the best option to read my website on the mobile. It is quite demanding and complicated. Now, let me give you an example. For instance, let me click on a lecture, Forcing Estimation for Arbor Design. You will see how the web pages are structured. There are figures, there are formulas. Let me just browse it in order to show you. You see there are formulas, there are sketches, formulas like this one, and there are links. And the links are meant to give to you additional information. What do I mean with additional? Let me go to the beginning of the page and let me take the first link, like for instance, not the first, but this one. Glossary of nautical terms. You see here, and there is a link. Let's click on it, and here you get a glossary of these terms, which is interesting. It's interesting for you. Okay, now, what do I mean with additional information? I said the links give to you additional information. Let me make clear that the web page, without following the links, is enough to prepare your exam. Everything I may ask at the exam is reported here in these web pages. Perfect. Let me go back to the list. Maybe that some of them are not dealt with, and in this case I will remove them. You see that here there is written provisional list. If for some reason we cannot go through all of them will be removed. So just keep in mind that this is a provisional list. Maybe that something is added, unlikely. Maybe that something is removed, maybe. Okay, second thing. So why there are links? If the web pages are self-sufficient for you to prepare the exam, why do I put links? As I said, links give to you additional information. What do I mean again with additional information? You know, your target when attending a university subject, it's not just to pass the exam. Your target is to get skills to be spent in the job market. Your target is to become competitive on the job market. And in order to do that, probably you should, at least for the topics, the subjects that you are more interested in, you probably should try to integrate your preparation. On some of the subject, I really encourage you to get additional knowledge, because this additional knowledge is something that not everybody has. And therefore it is something that you can really spend with proficiency on the job market. So maybe that when you are reading my lectures, there are terms that you don't know, and there is a link. So if you don't know the term, you need to get additional knowledge. Click on the link and see what the term means. Or maybe that you see that there is a link that looks interesting to you. So get these opportunities offered by the links. As I said, you don't need to do that for the exam, but still, this additional knowledge may be an opportunity to increase your mark at the exam. And more important, in my view, this additional knowledge may be something that gives to you competitivity on the job market. Here you see that there are tutorial web pages also for the practical exercises. As I said, we will elaborate some practical exercise, not many because we don't have many hours. We have 32 hours. I think that I will probably dedicate it to exercises something like 4-6 hours with an open source software. So I will not use MATLAB, for instance. I will not use Excel. Why? Because I think that openness is the future, and but besides being the future, openness gives to you an opportunity. If you can use open source software, then you have a skill that will be, I'm sure of that, highly appreciated in the job market. Just give me 1 second because I want to close because I get signals this web page. Okay, I get some beeps once in a while. I want to get rid of it. Okay, so open software. What kind of software? I will tell you later the details. I just want to anticipate that it's called R. R can be found here. I opened a Google page and just write here R project and with a dash between R and between project. And if you search on Google, the first link brings you to this web page, which is the web page of the R project. Please forget about the word statistical. It's a software which is very popular, used also in engineering for making computations. It was born as a software for performing statistical computations, but now it's widely used also for making any kind of computation, numerical computation, GIS, whatever. And I think it is indeed a very useful additional knowledge for you. And I may say that it works similarly to MATLAB, and the capabilities are more or less the same, but this one is open. And openness means a lot. First, because, you know, MATLAB, it's not open, you have to buy it, so it is expensive. And it's not much expensive, but still. And moreover, when a software is open and is very popular, like R is, you have a lot of users with whom you can interact easily because they have forums, etc. And you have the opportunity to find many free programs. So I think it is indeed very beneficial for you if we dedicate these 4-6 hours to learn R, which is very easy, by the way, and to solve some of the exercise that you may find, some of the problems that you may find in your future career if you will deal with Arbor engineering. How to install it? When you have some free time, please install it on your PC. It is easy. You just have to click on download. And download, it's not clickable. You have to click just below here, CRAN, or you may go to download here in the right of the page. But let's go to CRAN. I'm sorry. Okay, sorry for that. And here you see the mirrors. The mirrors where you can download the software. You can just get the first one or a close one like Austria, for instance. I click it there. And here you see that there is download R for Linux, Mac, and Windows. If you click, I guess that you have Windows. If you click on Windows, then you find this subsequent page where there are several parts of the package that you can download and install. Click on base. We just need the base. And then download R412 for Windows which is fine. You click here, and then the download starts, and then you just click on the installer, and you get it running in Windows. If you have a Mac, the path is similar. If you have a Linux computer like I have, so you may notice some differences in my screen with respect to Windows. You don't see a Windows screen because I am using a Linux PC. So if you have Linux, no problem. You can easily install under Linux as well. So when you have some time, please just make the install so we have the software ready, and you don't have to start working on it, just get it installed. Okay, now where you can you find the videos? First of all, here in my website there is a link to the online classroom. This was just changed because it was wrong up to half an hour ago, and this is the reason why I was late, because the link redirected to another course that I am teaching, so I couldn't find any student, of course. Now, where can you find the videos? There is a link to my YouTube page here and the playlist of Arbor Engineering. It is empty, of course, because there are no videos yet, but tomorrow or the day after tomorrow at the latest, you will be able to find everything. You will find the videos, as I said, also in Virtuale Unibo IT, and you will find it in Panopto. Here on the right, you will see that there will appear the links to the videos. As I said, they are replicas. So if you go on YouTube, you don't need to go in Panopto and vice versa. This is the calendar of the lectures. Today is Feb 23rd, and we should close everything by April 13. It may happen that we lose some lecture, and then if this is the case, maybe that we postpone a little bit, but I just have 32 hours to deliver of lectures, and so I think that if everything goes fine, in about let's say 50 days from now, we should be able to close the lectures. And let me just modify here the lecture time, because I'm taking a note, because here I wrote 2:10, 5:25. Actually, as I just mentioned to you, my intention is to make it 2 p.m. 5:15. So I will modify this. A few words about the exam. So the exam, as I mentioned to you, is an oral examination, like I think Professor Archetti does. Sometimes we agree to make the exam in the same day. So you have the opportunity the same day to take the exam with me and then with Professor Archetti, or vice versa. Sometimes we make it in different days, and it doesn't change anything for you. The only thing that changes just the date. And because when we make one exam, we communicate the score each other. Keep in mind that your final mark is unique and will be a weighted average of the marks that you get from me and from Professor Archetti. Weighted how? Weighted basing on the number of credits. I am teaching 4 credits, or the number of hours if you want. I am teaching 32 hours. Professor Archetti is teaching 16. So her mark weights half of my mark. And usually it's not a problem for the student to reach an agreement between us. And usually we round to the highest integer, the average. So if you get 26.4, we round to 27. So there is some flexibility. You could decline the mark either by me or by Professor Archetti. If you decline the mark from one of us, you can repeat the exam only for the part that you declined. So you take the exam with me, fine. Then you take the exam with the Professor Archetti and you decline the mark, you repeat the exam only with Professor Archetti. As I said, my exam is an oral examination. Sometimes keep in mind that with Professor Archetti, especially when there are few students only, we take agreements, maybe that only one of us makes the two exams for the two parts of the course, her part and my part. If I am making the exam, my exam typically lasts for about 20-30 minutes. I make 3-4 questions. I ask 3-4 questions. And if you deliver the presentation during the lectures, the number of questions is reduced. And keep in mind that sometimes I may ask to make some simple computations just in order to check if you are able to translate the concepts that you learned in the engineering practice, but very simple computations. So the exam is still an oral exam. It's not a written examination. And one of the questions aims to assess your capability, your abilities to speak, as I mentioned. And if you deliver the successful presentation, I can skip this question. And the ability to speak is extremely important today. I already mentioned to you that this is a skill that you should really make an effort to acquire. And this is why I use the ability to speak as a criteria to form my evaluation, my mark, my proposed mark. So keep in mind that this is extremely important. It's extremely important that you gain this skill. I already mentioned to you the reasons why this is important. And again, I would like to say once again that the questions are only related to what you can find on the lectures. Of course, if while answering the question that I asked to you, you expand a little bit, not too much, because you have also to learn. You have also to learn that when you are asked a question, the priority should be to give a reply to that question. So if you are asked a question as an engineer and you take 2 minutes to answer the question and 10 minutes to expand on side details, this is not good. But if you take 2 minutes for answering the question plus 1 minute to give interesting details, this is appreciated by me. The fact that you show that you can go beyond what I taught to you, what you can find in my web pages, is appreciated. And this could be a reason for giving the laude. Of course, what do you need for getting a full mark with laude? You need to speak well. You need to answer to all questions to demonstrate that you studied everything with rigor and by paying attention to the details. And also to get the laude, as I said, you have to, in a way, to do something more that generates like a surprise in me, like, wow, this is interesting. And keep in mind that the capability to generate a good impression, a good feeling, an interest, a surprise in the persons with whom you speak, it's an essential skill today. I mean, to prove that you went beyond what is strictly necessary in doing something, which can be to prepare an exam, but can be also to design a project. This is really something that it's extremely useful on the job market. So this is why I tell students, look, the laude for me is something that generates a very positive impression, a good feeling, a surprise. Keep the word surprise in mind because it's very meaningful and I think well understandable. So when you do something, if you can generate a surprise, it's really, think about the sporting activities. One thing is a goal with a a traditional, strategy, a traditional development. One other thing is something that people say, wow, this is spectacular. And so just keep in mind that in what you do in your life, in general, it's very important to generate this feeling that you are something more. And this is why I try to stimulate the students to find a way to do that. Of course, it's not easy. It's not easy, and not always we have the opportunity to demonstrate that we indeed did something more. But on average, the opportunity comes. Exams. Last thing to say, when? We cannot make exam during the lectures. And so it means that the first exam will be fixed after the lectures are officially closed, which means this year, I think, June 6 or 7. And we will make 3 exams before the end of July. Typically, the first is June 10, the second is June 25, and the third one is July 15, just to give you an example. The dates will be defined and finalized in agreement with you within a few weeks, when it will be clear what is the calendar of our lecture, how the lectures are evolving, and how the course is progressing. After these 3 opportunities, you will have another opportunity in September, if needed, another one in December, if needed, another one next year in January, February. So you will have 6 opportunities at least to give the exam. Besides the dates that we will fix, if you have special needs, sometimes students are required by external constraints to give the exam by a certain date. If you have external constraints, particular needs, you can speak with us. You can speak to us, and usually we find an accommodation. You are not many students, so it's not really a problem to find additional dates, additional opportunities for the exam. If you need any clarification, besides asking questions during the lectures, you can contact me by email, and I don't have a fixed day of the week, fixed day and time when I am available virtually on Teams, but if you contact me, I will give you an opportunity to speak with me soon. I think at this stage I concluded this introduction, and just let me know if you have any question. I'm just looking if the chat, there is nothing. Perfect. And if you don't have any question, I think we can start. Just 1 second, I get organized in this way. So okay, let me keep this here. Perfect. And let me open the first lecture. The first lecture in the list is titled Arbor Engineering, the learning process adopted in the course. Actually, this is an introduction that I make to all of my students. And what kind of introduction? I just would like to emphasize before starting any course, any subject, that we are living now in an era that is marked by a rapid change, not only for the pandemic. It is our world, our society, our environment, it is changing with a very fast pace. It is changing rapidly. So I think that education must take it into account. University education needs to be very dynamic, needs to be able to update itself. We need to be able to update the education very quickly and continuously. And also, what is rapidly changing are the skills that are required to the potential workers in the job market. They are rapidly evolving. So the purpose of this introduction is to explain how I am planning to address this problem. This problem, which is, by the way, also an opportunity. Because when things are changing, if you are quick to adapt, you have a very good opportunity to be able to do something that other people, older people than you, cannot do. So, I mean, it is an opportunity indeed, provided that we can easily solve the problems that change is causing. And the problem is that, again, we need to be able to adapt. It's not easy. And so, what are the two concepts, the two messages that I would like to give with this short introduction? First, look at this table here. These are what are called the 21st century skills. You see there is a link here. If you can look at my mouse, let me just magnify a little bit the font size. So if you look at my mouse, which now became an end because it's over this link, let's open it. And the 21st century skills, this is a Wikipedia page. I trust Wikipedia in English a lot. So most of my links are from Wikipedia. So read here, the 21st century skills comprise skills, abilities, and learning disposition that have been identified as being required for success in the 21st century society and workplaces. By whom? By who? By educators, business leaders, academics, and governmental agencies. And here you see on the right the table that I was projecting on the screen just a while ago. And let me go back to this page. So let me close the link and let's look at these skills, because I think they give very useful suggestions to you. Please have a look. I'm not discussing them. I just want to emphasize what they are referred to. First, learning and innovation. Second, digital literacy. Third, career and life. So look at the terms here, at the items. Critical thinking and problem solving, extremely important. If I look for a person to work with me, the best of my wish is that the person is an excellent problem solver. Creativity and innovation, they are related. You see there is some relationship between creativity and problem solving, innovation and problem solving, communication, collaboration. Digital literacy means that you know how to use digital information. And let me say something more here. You must know how to use the personal computer, and not only for browsing the web, reading email, or using MATLAB or R or whatever. You should be able to treat the PC as a tool that is in your hands, a tool that you can exploit at the best of the opportunities. So it's not just browsing, reading emails, using Excel and Word. It's maybe to use open software. It's maybe to create algorithms, because sometimes you have problems that to solve them, you cannot use a software that is already prepared. You need to prepare it. And I mean, for this reason, you really need to treat the PC as your best friend. You know the limitation of the machine, you know the capabilities, you know how to use open software, you know how to use different operating systems. I mentioned to you before that I am using Linux. Why? Because at a certain point, I realized that some of my colleagues, I was a Windows user. I realized that some of my colleagues were able to do things with Linux that I couldn't do with Windows. I realized at a certain point that with Linux, the computer lasts more time. It's less stressed, and it it doesn't become obsolete. So this is why I said, yes, let me try that. And it was not easy, but it was not easy because I was already an old guy. I was already more than 40 when I turned to Linux. But if you start when you are a student, it's much easier. And also it's easier now than 10 years ago. Career and life, flexibility, adaptability, initiative and self-direction, social interaction, productivity, accountability, extremely important. You have to be accountable. Leadership and responsibility. So, I mean, being accountable means that you are happy to be evaluated. You are happy to go under an exam because you see the exam as an opportunity, not as a problem. And it looks like these are difficult statements, difficult things, difficult concepts. I tell you, they are not. It is extremely simple to find a way to be more creative, to be more productive, to be accountable. It is extremely simple. Of course, you need to gain an overarching skill. The overarching skill is that you need to be able to see the opportunities. You have to be able to transform the problems in opportunities. If in your life you don't have any problem, it's difficult that you have opportunities. And the opportunities come from problems. It's clear. Now, this is the first message that I wanted to deliver in this introduction. What is the second message? The second message is that today, I think engineers must be more concentrated than ever in finding solutions, because there are several challenges originated by these changes that our world is experiencing, for which we don't have real solutions. Think of sustainability. Everybody recognizes that sustainability is extremely important, but what are the solutions? And then it becomes a mess because the ideas of the manager, of the politicians, of the policymakers are not clear. They are not converging. So it's not very clear if we want to avoid climate change. What should we do from a practical point of view? And I think the engineer has a fundamental role in that. When we have to find solutions, who is the best in finding solutions? I would say the engineer is the best one. And therefore, I think that education in engineering today has more than ever to concentrate on solutions. And this is why this is the learning process that I want to use. If you take this picture and if you take the small arrows and you revert them, you get, and you ignore the big arrow, you revert the small arrows and you ignore the big arrow, you get the traditional flow of the education process, from theory to models. Through data, you feed the models, you get design variables, and then the solutions. Let's try to concentrate on solutions. And depending on the solutions that we need, I highly suggest you to this approach. Depending on the solutions that we need, we find with a back path, with a back direction, the design variables that we need, we identify the models, and we identify the theory. In this way, we only study the theory that we need. And I think this approach in a master degree program in engineering is precisely what we need. In a bachelor, it is fine that you study more theory than what you need. In a master, I think we need to be focused on the purpose. That's it. Have a look at this page. It's not a matter, it's not anything for the exam. So it's not something that you have to study. But it is something which I think you should consider carefully. And in order to start in your mind the process of being creative and being, through creativity, communication, etc., through the 21st century skills, become competitive. Becoming competitive doesn't mean that you kill other competitors. Absolutely not. Becoming competitive means that you go in a competition and you emerge as the best one. And there is nothing wrong in this. I would say that it would be instead wrong if we didn't elaborate if we didn't get this ambition. Okay, I think I can go back to the list of the lectures and go to the first one that is a bit technical. And now let me just, this is again a premise, but it's a technical premise. Let me open in the bottom of the lecture. I go quickly in the bottom. You see there is a link, the PowerPoint presentation of this lecture. Let me open it because I think probably it was already open. Just 1 second. Yeah, I already had it. Just 1 second. Here it is. Okay. Here it is, the PowerPoint. So let me use this. And as I said, when we talk about harbors, I would like to start by talking of coasts, because the coasts are the environment where the harbors are placed in. So let me make this introduction on the coasts. And first of all, let me emphasize the importance of the coasts. They are extremely important for the welfare, the well-being of a country, and the public health and societal development. Coasts are extremely important for societal development, and therefore they are extremely important for sustainable development. The coasts are natural environments, and to give you an idea of how much they are relevant, I give you some numbers, which you can see in the slide. Coastal areas occupy less than 15% of the Earth's land surface, so it's a tiny percentage. But coasts accommodate more than 40% of the world population. In fact, about, and these are numbers of a couple of years ago, about 1.2 billion people live within 100 kilometers from the coastline and 100 meters of altitude gain. So the result is that the average population density close to the coasts is nearly 3 times higher than the global average. So it is really impressive to see that not most, but a large part of the human population is concentrated along these belts of land, the coastline. Let me give you some numbers for Italy. Italy is very mountainous. It's a complicated territory. And then the result is that about 60% of the population lives in coastal areas, and about 24% of the population is concentrated in big coastal cities. Naples, Genova, Venice. We have big coastal cities which were very flourishing in the past precisely and are very flourishing now, precisely because they have a port, they have an harbor, and they are over the sea. For any country, the coastline is an important resource. And for what? For what reason? Fishing, seaborne trade, tourism, and related commercial activities. There is a planet that is gravitating around the coasts, and there is a lot of commercial interest. In fact, landlocked countries, which means the countries that don't have access to the sea, are very limited in number. Only 48 countries in the world are landlocked, and they are known to be disadvantaged. Let me show you a figure here with the map of the landlocked countries. Just 1 second. Here we are. This is the map. And you see they are only a few. Some of them are also in Europe, and they are known to be disadvantaged. Okay. Now let's remove this. And let's go on. Now, what is the coastline? In engineering, it's important to be clear with the definitions. Remember, the engineer is required to be very rigorous. The artist need to be creative, and maybe that rigorousness is not so required for an artist. For the engineer, rigorousness is essential. Now, sorry, I'm trying to rearrange the windows in my screen. Okay, good. I am done. So, what is the definition for a coastline? It is the line that marks the boundary between the land and the ocean, or a sea, or a big lake at the high tide mark. So, if you had to draw a coastline, you follow the boundary between water and land during a high tide. The position of the coastline cannot be precisely determined for the coastline paradox. The coastline paradox is an interesting paradox. Let me show you the web page, and which has a link. And this is the Wikipedia page presenting the coastline paradox. What is the paradox? It's a counterintuitive observation that the coastline doesn't have a well-defined length. Because look at the picture of the UK, of Great Britain. You see that depending on the scale of representation, you get a coastline that increases in length as the scale of representation becomes finer and finer. And the result is that this paradox leads to the result that the length of the coastline is potentially infinite. Let's say that it is possible, by the way, if you fix a scale of representation, of course, to compute the length of the coastline. And one important parameter is the coast area ratio for countries. Again, a Wikipedia page. And here there is a table where for several countries gives the land area and the coast area ratio. And let's look at the TWF estimate, and which is the estimate by the World Fact Book. So it's a reference. Let's look at this reference, and let's look at the coast area ratio of TWF. Of course, the coast area ratio depends on the scale of representation, so the differences that you see are due to different scale of representation, but you can compare several countries basing on one of these two columns. So I selected here for Canada the two numbers. Let's look at TWF, and you see that there is a big difference in the coast area ratio. And the coast area ratio is higher for highlands. Italy, by the way, has a quite high coast area ratio. And where the coast area ratio is higher, it means that the length of the coastline divided by the area of the country is more relevant. And therefore, the country has more coasts. And of course, an island is surrounded by the sea or the ocean, and if the island is formed by one country only, of course, the length of the coastline is higher with respect to countries which are not completely surrounded by the sea or the ocean. For instance, Canada, the Canada-United States border doesn't form, it's not counted, of course, in the length of the coastline, and therefore it is understandable that for For Canada, the number is lower than for Indonesia or New Zealand, for instance. Even if Canada has a quite long coastline, so you see that the number is still significant. The world has, for comparison, a TWF coast area ratio of 2.3. Okay, let's go back to our PowerPoint. So the coastline is the line that forms the boundary between the land and the sea, and it is shaped by many drivers. There are different shapes, and therefore we can classify the coastline into different categories depending on, for instance, the shape. And what determines the shape of a coastline? Many factors, many drivers, including fluvial deposition and erosion caused by waves, because I mean, the coastline, this is one of the problems, that it's exposed by the erosion induced by waves. Waves, when they approach the coastline, as you know, they break, and therefore their energy is released in the form of transfer of mass of water. After breaking, we have the water that is moving up and down on the swash zone, and therefore there is erosion. Okay, and then there is the change in land elevation, subsidence, or tectonic rays. And therefore we have different forms for the beaches, and there are two criteria that can be used to classify the beaches based on their form. And the two categories of criteria are the descriptive criteria and the genetic criteria. The descriptive criteria are based on the morphological or lithological features of the coast. So I look at the coast, and from the form of the coast, I make a classification. The genetic criteria instead is based on the assessment of the processes that led to the formation and modeling of the coast. Let me give you a couple of examples. So if we use descriptive criteria, we can, broadly speaking, classify the coasts in two categories: cliffed coast and flat coast. I think the terms speak for themselves. Cliffed coasts are originated typically by erosion, and are characterized by highly sloping or vertical transition between the land and the sea. Think, for instance, at the coasts of Dover in the UK, and there is almost vertical transition. The cliffed coast is often characterized by the presence of small beaches. A beach is made by sand. They are called usually pocket beaches, and are usually located where a river gets into the sea. The flat coast is instead flat and is originated by deposition, has a mild slope. The flat coast include the beaches. I mean, as I said, also in the cliffed coast there might be pocket beaches, but they are very small. The flat coast usually is dominated by beaches, which are defined as accumulation of loose sediments. And the beaches are mainly originated and shaped by fluvial deposition, because this kind of coast is as I said, originated by deposition, and are shaped by the erosion that originated by waves. Perfect. Now, let's move forward with another criteria of coastline classification, and this is based on genetic features. So this is an example of genetic feature. And The second criteria divides the cost, broadly speaking, again in two categories: emergent and submergent costs. Emergent costs may be originated by an uplift of the land, and the word emergent speaks for itself, or may be originated by a sea level decrease. And what is the distinguishing feature of the emergent cost? The emergent cost is shaped by the ocean, because basically it's something that was below sea level that emerged, and therefore the shaping is done by the ocean. The submergent costs are the opposite ones, are those that have been inundated by the sea because of sea level rise or land subsidence. What is the distinguishing feature? The submergent coast is shaped on the land by the rivers, and therefore you have river valleys that were submerged, and you may have then, or maybe past glaciations that shaped the coast, and the resulting shape is different. Let me show you some figures, some pictures. This is an example of, let me open it here. This is an example of a flat beach, of a flat coast, and look at the structure made by boulders that you see there. This is a groin. It's a structure that is put into place. It's built in order to preserve the beach from erosion. And usually when you see these groins, it means that there is erosion and people want to, in a way, to keep the sand there. So this is an example of a flat coast. And this is an example, this is the Chesapeake Bay in the United States. I hope my pronunciation is correct, which is a submerged coast, and you can clearly recognize the pattern of valleys that were inundated by the sea. By the way, this is a natural environment that is very, very valuable, has a high value, and is protected. Now, I spoke so far about the social function and value of the seaports, of the beaches. Now, let me talk about, it's not in the slides, of the social function and value of the seaports. Because if a beach is playing a key role for the societal development of a country, I would say that the core of this key role, of this fundamental role, is precisely the port. The port, it's the connection between the ocean and the coastal society. So the coast is a connection between the ocean and the land. The port is the connection between the ocean and society. It's also a connection between humans. And I think that is quite intuitive what is the value of a port and the key role that a port plays for local economy. And in fact, in the socioeconomic and industrial context, the port is often the driver of important commercial activity. And therefore, when we design a port, we need to take in careful consideration social and urban planning. Again, the port is what connects the sea with society. And also economic theory refers to port as important factors of economic development. And if you think at many major cities in the world, they are port cities. Think of New York, Genoa, think of many others, I mean. And to give an example, I give you some numbers, and let me put my web page there. The port of Genoa is characterized, by the way, here there is a picture of the port of Genoa. It's characterized by these numbers, by these figures. More than 51 million tons per year of goods moved in the port of Genoa. And we are talking of a port that is important, but it's not the most important in the world. About 6,000 docks here. About 4,000 per day cars and trucks in out. About 3,000 day trains in out. About 2,400,000 containers per year in out. About almost 3 million passengers per year moved. And keep in mind that the port of Genoa plays a relevant role in the planning of, for instance, road infrastructures of the region, in the planning of the development of the city of Genoa. I mean, it's really a driver of societal development there. And it's a demonstration of the value of the ports. And many ancient civilizations flourished by establishing commercial activities through maritime trade. Ancient China, ancient Egypt, ancient Greece, India, Rome. And these are the ports of these ancient civilizations. So, I mean, it is justified that we dedicate some time to study port and harbor design. Now, also here we have some slides talking about the social function of beaches. I think we can be very quick in go through them, because our interest in beaches here is marginal. And I just would like to say that a topical issue today, and which is the assignment of an economic value to beaches. And it is clear that beaches have an economic value, but when it's time to make investment to protect them, to recover them, of course, we need to make a cost-benefit analysis. And it is not easy to quantify the benefits that the beaches are bringing to the social context. I think it is relatively easier for ports. For beaches, there are some of their features that are not easy to quantify in economic terms, like the ecologic value, the value for the public health, for the welfare, for the wealth of people, and for the overall value that they give to the quality of life. And they have an intangible importance to, as I said, health and welfare of people. And they are also an important cultural heritage. If you think, for instance, at the beach close to Ravenna on the Adriatic Sea, along the Emilia-Romagna and Marche region and Abruzzo region, it is a real cultural heritage, which can cause really adverse effect to people if they are lost for some reason, for erosion, for bad maintenance, for climate change. And this is something that it's really to be kept into account. Keep in mind that when you design a port, you build a port, an harbor, you impact the coastline and the beaches around it. If you have beaches, you impact them. And this is something that you have to take into account. As we will see, when designing a port, you need to, just one second, I am checking if my headset is working, but I hope that you step in if something is not working for some reason. And I was saying, as we will see, when you design a port, you have to get involved in an interdisciplinary effort. And you have to consider several things which are related to the port design, like, for instance, the urban planning, road planning, and also the planning of the management of the coastline around the harbor, which is impacted. I mean, not only because you cannot have access to it. You know, some people like to walk along the beaches, for instance, but when you get close to an harbor, then it becomes a problem because you cannot walk on the coastline anymore. This is just an example, but also the harbor maybe it is a source of pollutants, of pollution. And we have to be very careful. It is a potential source of pollution. We have to be very careful in the impact that our intervention, which I mean, it is an opportunity to build an harbor, to expand an harbor. It's an opportunity. But on the other hand, it's something that is also impacting the coastline, with which it's in close connection. Beaches are important because they have a very important and valuable ecological environment. There is a lot of life into the beaches, and also let me just mention, I think you attended the course, my course in coastal engineering in the fall semester last year, and let me mention also another problem which is related to beaches and to some extent also to harbor design, which is saltwater intrusion. Why I'm saying that saltwater intrusion is related to harbor design? Because saltwater intrusion is it's also caused by groundwater extraction and therefore urban development close to the coast. So this is another issue that we need really to be very careful about several different reasons of concern when we design an harbor and we make an intervention that is interfering with this very delicate environment. On the other hand, it's a fascinating discipline because it's so dynamic, so interconnected. There is really a deep connection between the sea, the land, the humans, and their activities, the climate, and the use of resources like groundwater, like oil, which it's often found in the bottom of the ocean. There is a so interesting and dynamic connection. There is an environment that is characterized by a so strong complexity, which makes this discipline fascinating. And there is one direct consequence, direct implication for the engineer, implication of this complexity. There is a lot of uncertainty in the processes that are related to coast development, harbor forcings, waves, movement of loads, of trucks, of cargoes. There is a lot of uncertainty in that. And these processes are difficult to model. They are more difficult with respect to modeling the loads on a building. Modeling the loads on a berth or the loads on a port is more difficult than modeling the loads on a building. And what is the implication? The implication is that there is uncertainty. And the implication is that analytical models sometimes are difficult to set up to describe these processes, which are highly chaotic and highly uncertain, as I said. And therefore, empirical solutions are often used, empirical equations. I think you already got a glance of this because you learned already that when we study waves, erosion, we very often use empirical approaches in order to make our design. And this is something that is an essential premise, I think, to the study of Arbor engineering and coastal engineering. And I think it is important to get why. Why in other branches of engineering we use analytical approaches, while when we deal with the sea, with the coasts, we use plenty of empirical approaches. The reason is the complexity of these really many interconnections between several different processes. If we talk about saltwater intrusion, which is the slide that is now on the screen, you easily understand that it's not something that can be easily modeled with an analytical model. And very often we are asked to, we choose the solution of an empirical approach. Okay, and I think we can skip these last 3 slides because they are not relevant to the prosecution of our discussion. I just want to show you this one. This slide is showing some terminology to describe the waves. We will talk about waves a lot in Arbor engineering. I assume that you know almost everything of terminology, how to estimate extreme waves, etc. Still, I will make some brief recaps of the theory, not on the terminology. So what you see here on the slide, I assume that it's already well known to you. Okay, I think we can close this PowerPoint. I wonder if you have any question. Let me have a look at the chat. If you have any question, just step in. And before I make the break, one thing I wanted to tell you, I'm not stopping the recording. I'm stopping my audio and video, but I will keep the video going on because otherwise there is a too high risk that I forget to start it again. And therefore, when you will watch the video, you will have to skip these 15 minutes. Was it fine so far? Am I too boring, too quick, too slow?
No problem, sir. Everything was clear and nice. Thank you.
Okay. I think we can meet again at 4 o'clock then, okay?
Thank you.
Yeah, bye-bye. See you later. Okay, here I am. Can you please just confirm to me that you are online?
Yes, Professor.
Very good, thank you. Now, 1 second, perfect, I share the screen. Okay, now let me go back to the list of the lectures and let's click on the third link, port planning and environmental impact. Just let me make a check at the bottom of the page. I don't think I have PowerPoint here, in fact. Okay, so we will use this page to directly without PowerPoint presentation now. And just 1 second, I close the mailer. Okay, now let's start going into the details of port or Arbor design. Keep in mind that I will use the term port and Arbor as synonyms. It's not clear in the literature what is the most appropriate term depending on the situations. Usually with port we mean the technical part of it, while with Harbour we mean the whole set of the technical part plus the environment where the port is placed. But actually it is also a matter of English versus American English, and therefore we can safely treat these two terms as synonym. Port planning and design is the subject of our course, so we need to go into the technical details. I already mentioned that it's an interdisciplinary activity. It's an interdisciplinary engineering design. And there are several disciplines that are involved: economy, commerce, maritime trade, strategy and policy, and logistic, and also law enforce, because of course there are technical prescriptions that are given by law, which are different in different countries. The fact that it's interdisciplinary makes the activity for sure quite complex, makes the activity quite elaborated. It requires a lot of interaction between people with different backgrounds. This is never easy. It's never easy because it's sometimes we speak different languages, different terminologies, and also we have different targets. For an engineer, of course, the target is to provide a design for the structures. For a biologist, the target may be the preservation of the environment. So different targets means that we have different approaches and different views on the same problem. However, this interdisciplinary interaction is the key. In the 21st century is one of the keys to succeed in pursuing sustainable development. Keep in mind that we are talking here of two terms, sustainable and development, that traditionally were considered as antithetic. Now, as engineers, we have to find a compromise between the two needs, societal development and sustainability, to make sure that the resources that we are using now still remain available for the future generations. Now, design is a complicated activity. It is useful if we try to classify, to articulate the design through phases. And in fact, you see here in the web page that we can assume that the design is articulated through planning and consultation with the stakeholders, preliminary load estimation and preliminary design of structures, environmental impact assessment, approval of the preliminary design, and then final design. Planning and consultation, it's probably one of the phases where interdisciplinarity plays a more fundamental role. Because of course we need to consider urban planning, as I mentioned, road infrastructures, touristic activities, touristic value of the port, environmental impact, and in general the societal implications. And everything that requires an interactions between humans and environment is dominated by a lot of uncertainty, by chaotic behaviors. Chaotic means that even a minor change in the boundary conditions may lead to very different development trajectories. And what is particularly complicated is to make predictions on the societal development, because this is needed. We need, when we design a port, the lifetime, the expected lifetime is varying between, we will see that, but it's varying between 50 and 100 years. So it's a long time span during which there will be a societal change. And we need to make an effort to predict this change, which is not easy, because everything that is related, as I said, to humans and environment is not easy to predict. And the pandemic is a clear demonstration. And environmental impact, keep into account that it's very sensitive. Also, it's a sensitive issue. When there is sensitivity, you have to be twice careful, because of course sensitivity is something that goes beyond what are the technical implications of a decision. And when there is an environmental impact, there are technical implications. We need to identify strategies in order to mitigate it, to resolve it. But we also have to find the way to communicate well with the stakeholders if the topic is sensitive and environmental impact is sensitive. The value of logistics, I already discussed about it. And there are several ports, including the port in Ravenna, suffering from lack of space, suffering from excess of traffic. And this implies that we need to be very efficient in devising the management, planning the management of the port. And logistics is extremely important. And logistics means also plans for transportation of both people and goods, because needs making plans to update the road infrastructures. Means making plans for managing the traffic, because the port is like an engine that produces traffic, not only in the sea but also on the land. And again, the port is a potential source of contamination, of pollution, and particular attention should be paid in how to recover it. There are several ports, including the port in Ravenna, where, for instance, the displacement and the treatment of muds resulting from dredging is a problem, because there are contaminants in the muds, contaminants that are spread by the ships, contaminants that are caused by leakages of fluids, and then the muds get contaminated. Once in a while, we have to remove these muds, because in order to gain sea depth for boat maneuvering, etc. And so the result is that we collect a lot of mud, and the problem is to displace it because it's contaminated. Even if it was not contaminated, it would be a problem anyway, because to displace muds, keep in mind that you cannot release just as it goes in the sea, because we cannot increase turbidity after a certain level. So muds usually are displaced in the land, but where? And sometimes they need treatment. There are costs. These are all aspects that need to be carefully considered. And then there is the very technical part, which is the load estimation, for instance. And beside the loads, the technical part is also to study how to shape the berth and to shape the whole structure of the port in order to keep into account the space that ships need to, that boats need to berth and to leave. So to approach the port and to leave, the space for maneuvering the boat. These are more technical issues. These are the issues we are interested in. We will not talk about port layout planning. This is an issue that we don't have time to discuss. We will talk in particular, we'll discuss in particular load estimation. So load estimation, first of all, we talk about load estimation for berths. What is a berth? A berth, here there is a link, let's click on it, is a designed location in a port or harbor. You see here, port or harbor synonyms, used for mooring vessels when they are not at sea. So they provide a vertical front, which allows safe and secure mooring that can then facilitate the unload or loading of cargo and vessels. So this is an example here of a marina berth, a very simple one. This is a floating one. But you see there is a vertical side, a vertical wall, where the ships can be moored. Sorry, let me go back to the Wikipedia page, and I'm looking whether there are other pictures. I would say no. Let's close it. So there are several different structures for the possible structure for the berths. Keep in mind that they need to be managed, and therefore they are often managed by a responsible body, an authority typically. And of course there are also private berths which are managed by individuals, but our attention is mainly focused on ports and berths that are used for commercial purpose. In these cases, usually there is a managing authority who is responsible for maintenance, for managing the traffic, the boat traffic, managing also the land traffic in order to make sure that the activities are well organized and efficient. We need to, first of all, estimate the loads. These are structures. The berths are structures. And as usual, the first step that the engineer has to complete to perform a design is the estimation of the load. I have a figure, later on I will show you, which reports, summarizes the main and more frequent loads on a berth. Let me just anticipate, before looking at the figure, that there are three main categories of loads or forces acting on a berth structure. We can classify them in loads from the seaside, loads on the berth structure, and loads from the land side. Let me just discuss them a little bit. Let me first say that we have to focus also on the extreme values of these loads, and I am discussing now the most frequent ones, the most frequent loads that we need to consider. Keep in mind that our discussion is not exhaustive. There are loads that we are discussing that could not be there. There are additional ones that may need to be considered. As usual, as an engineer, you have to get a preliminary picture. You have to figure out what are the main problems in your design. and you have to figure out, based on your experience and intuition, what are the main loads for everything that you design. The first step when you're asked to design something is to get a big picture of the structure, the possible solutions, the main challenges, and technically speaking, the loads and the structural solutions to make sure that your design is appropriate to the loads themselves. It is, we can, let me just look at the figure. Here, perfect, and just 1 second. One second, because I need to organize. Okay. Okay. Give me 1 minute. Okay, this is the figure. As I said, it's just a synthesis. Maybe that we need to consider additional loads and discard some of them. And first, loads can be divided in 2 categories: horizontal loads and vertical loads. It is an usual approach in engineering, and it is common practice that vertical loads are taken by the foundation of the berth, which may be piles or columns, and horizontal loads are instead taken by friction forces and to some extent again by the foundations. And also horizontal loads may be taken by passive earth pressure from the land side. Now, loads can be also divided into normal loads and extreme loads. The latter, extreme loads, may also be called accidental loads or live loads. Normal loads refer to any load that may reasonably be expected to occur during the design life of the structure under normal conditions, under normal operating conditions, like for instance self-weight and operating and loads given to the fact that cars are arriving on the berths, trucks are arriving, etc. Exceptional loads may occur in exceptional situations, and they can be many, like for instance seismic load, or the load that is due to a boat colliding with the berth. So it's something that may be exceptional. If there is an error in maneuvering the boat, then there is a collision. It's something that may be exceptional. So there are many types of live loads. They are infrequent, and therefore it is unlikely that they occur at the same time. So this means while normal loads, usually they occur at the same time, if you think at self-weight, and the load, the horizontal load given by trucks that are approaching the berths, these typically occur at the same time. The exceptional loads, they typically don't occur at the same time unless they are correlated. It's clear that they may be correlated. For instance, if you think at the load given by seismic activity and the load given by waves originated by a possible tsunami, then it's clear that these 2 loads can be correlated, because the tsunami typically it's originated by an earthquake. Some of them may be very unlikely that occur together. If you think at the seismic, for instance, load, and the load that may be given by both an accident, a boat that is crashing against the berth while approaching, it's unlikely that they occur together. So a key aspect in load estimation is to identify the concurrency factors. These are factors that basically reduce the incidence of two extreme loads by assuming that they don't occur together. For instance, if I have a live load, an accidental load that implies a vertical pressure of a vertical forcing of 100 kilograms, and another accidental load that implies a vertical force of 300 kilograms, the combined effect is not 300 plus 100, but is 300 plus 100 times a concurrency factor. So I get the highest of the two, 300, and only a small part of the lower of the two, 100. By small, I mean a part, a fraction of the second additional load, a second live load, a fraction that is determined by the concurrency factor, which is usually less than 1, unless we have knowledge to assume that they can occur at the same time. Of course, if the two loads are correlated and they may occur at the same time, I made the example of the tsunami and the earthquake, then the concurrency factor may be up to 1. But usually, if there is not a strong correlation between the two live loads, the concurrency factor allows to, in a way, to reduce the second load, the lower one, to a fraction. And what is the amount of this fraction? What is the value that we have to assign to the concurrency factors? In most of the cases, they are dictated by law in force or guidelines. And this is a first concept that I need to emphasize. Anytime that you design, that you commit yourself to designing a structure, you have to be aware, you have to get information, rigorous information on the constraints, the prescriptions that are given by laws and guidelines, and they depend on the country. So I may give you some examples, but I will give you some examples of guidelines given, for instance, in Spain, which may be different by the guidelines that are given in Italy, which may be different by guidelines that are given in different contexts. And it is perfectly appropriate that they are different, because some issues like concurrency factors depend on the local conditions, on the local situations, depends on the weather, depends on the sea weather. And also depends on the type of activity that is carried out in the port. The prescription for touristic ports are different with respect to the prescription for commercial ports. And therefore it is extremely important that you make a preliminary assessment of the constraints by law and by guidelines. If you have laws, you are forced to respect them. So if there is a concurrency factor that is dictated by a law, you need to absolutely to conform with the law prescriptions. But even if you have guidelines suggesting best practices, you have to be very careful about them, because if you are given guidelines and you relax them, you are less conservative. If something happens, keep in mind that as an engineer, you are responsible for what you design. And if something happens, you may be called to explain why you decided to be less restrictive. You decided to be less conservative with respect to what it is suggested by a guideline, which is considered to be a best practice. And therefore, of course, you need to get information. This is a step that is essential and not easy. And I highly suggest you that you refer to colleagues, to experts. It is not easy because, experience is required in order to get information on the laws and guidelines in force. Sometimes it is easy. There are, for instance, the European codes for the design of certain structures. Sometimes it's not so easy, especially if you go in a very different context with respect to what you are used, with respect to where you are used to work. And again, this is indeed an important step, and usually the concurrency factors are given by these guidelines or laws in force. Now, let's look at the figure now. And you see that there are three categories of loads, and they are also separated between vertical and horizontal loads. So, the three categories are the ones that I already mentioned. From the seaside, horizontal loads from the sea, from the docking ship, and from ship at the dock. So there is a further classification. From the sea, we have waves, acting directly on the berth structure. Usually, this kind of load is not very significant unless you have a very complicated condition of sea weather. This is not really something relevant. And then you may have high pressure, of course, not everywhere. Talking from horizontal load from the seaside that come from a docking ship, you may have ship impact, which may be accidental or not, and ship friction against the protections against the now I am forgetting I will remember the name of these protections that avoid the impact of the ship against the berth. In any case, these protections are often made by rubber, and therefore they generate friction. And then you have the bollard forces. From the ship at the dock, you may get bollard forces again, and the bollard forces during docking are different from those that come from the ships that are already docked. There is the action of wind against the docked ship, waves against the docked ship, and currents. We will see in detail some of the techniques for estimating some of these actions, some of these loads. Vertical loads from the seaside, we have the bollard forces, because the bollard forces can have a vertical component. Their major component is horizontal, but still there can be a vertical component. And also the vertical forces on fenders. I didn't remember the term, is fender, the term of the protection that is placed in the berth to avoid the direct impact of the ship against the berth structure. I just want to show you a couple of pictures here. Just 1 second. If you have doubt about some terms, if you look at fender, and yeah, you see here in this figure an example of a fender that is located on the boat, and let me see, fenders port. And here are other fenders in this figure here, which are anchored at the berth structure. And what you see here, it's the terminal part where the ship is anchored, and here the bollard forces are transferred from the ship to the berth structure. Okay, let me go back here. Now, vertical forces on fenders, as I said, I forces can have a vertical component. Now let's look at the actions from the berth. We have horizontal loads given by thermic dilatation. Cranes, I think you know the term, but let me just show you a picture. Crane. Here are the cranes. And of course they are used to load and unload the ships, and they transfer, they are located on the berth, and then they can transfer an horizontal and a vertical load. There are wind forces, wind acting on the berth structures, and then from the structures the load is transmitted to the berth. Then we have, sorry, I just pronounced the word in Italian. We have forces against carbs, and the carbs are, let me show you a picture. The literal translation would be a brake, but let me show you a picture of a carb. Maybe that we can find a carb in the port. Let me see. I wouldn't say that. Let me just put carb road. Here are images of carbs, and carbs in a berth are placed in order to stop the moving of vehicles, to avoid that vehicles get too close to the limit of the berth and risk of falling into the sea. Of course, if you put a carb there in order to arrest a vehicle, then a moving vehicle, then you get loadings on the carb. Okay, good. And then we have friction forces, vehicles braking, or for instance cranes moving. You have vertical loads from berth buildings. Of course, if you build something on a berth, there is a loading. Superimposed load, which may be trucks or whatever. Snow load and ice forces again. And then we have the loads from the land side. Horizontal loads may be soil filling. Soil filling, of course, is used in order to connect the berth structure with the land. And the load on the filling, on the soil filling, because if you park a car on the soil filling, then you have an action on the berth. Pour water load, if the soil filling gets wet, then you have some additional load due to the water pressure. And then the vertical load, again, soil filling and superimposed load on the land. This is basically a panorama, but as I said, there might be additional loads, and some of them, like ice pressure, may be not there in certain conditions. So, of course, your assessment, your analysis is extremely important in order to get a picture, an overall picture of what you have to consider. Very good. Now, there is in my website, just let me go back to it. In this web page, there is a quote from a manual which I would like to read together with you here, which again states the importance of studying regulations. Different countries have different regulations. All constructions have to be in accordance with the legislation in the country in which it is built. It is trivial, but it's important to emphasize the concept. Many countries have their own standards for marine and coastal construction, but some do not. the designer has to find out whether or not there are national standards or guidelines that have to be used for design. If such national standards exist, they have to be used. And if national guidelines exist, it is recommended to use them. If no national legislation, standard, or guideline exists, the designer is not required to use specific design manuals, but it is highly recommended to use internationally accepted standards and guidelines instead of trying to create a specific guideline for the project. I think this quote, I just quoted this sentence because I think it is highly instructive. And in particular, an example of international rules are the Euro codes, the European codes. And also keep in mind that these national regulations and Euro codes, as I mentioned to you before, may give orders of magnitude or precise values for safety concurrency factors and individual loads. And I just want to give you an example, which is related precisely to the combination of loads that is discussed here. Okay. A load combination and results, as I said, when there are concurrent loads, and in particular, the load combination, as I mentioned before, for exceptional loads is extremely important because these exceptional loads are very frequently quite relevant. So, I mean, it's necessary to take into consideration concurrency factors because if we assume that all the exceptional loads are occurring together, the result is that the structure is oversized. And oversizing is something that we have to avoid in engineering, not only for the economic costs given by oversizing, but the main reason to avoid it is the environmental impact. A structure, an engineering structure, has always an environmental impact. And if you oversize it, then the environmental impact is increased, not linearly, but exponentially. What I mean to say is that if you make a berth twice large, the environmental impact is more than doubled because there are many feedbacks. And therefore, oversizing is really to be avoided. Of course, we don't have to undersize. We have to find a good compromise. And therefore, this is why making engineering, it's not always easy. And there are, of course, in this particular case, there are guidelines that we can use. And so how to combine the different exceptional loads. And usually, the first indication, which I already mentioned to you, is to look at correlation. Correlation between these exceptional loads. Are they independent, completely independent? If they are, it's unlikely that they occur at the same time. If there is some dependency, they may occur at the same time. So the first consideration is look at correlation. And there is a second consideration that I am reporting here, which is more specific. The seismic load is usually considered to be an accidental load when designing berths. So it's not considered to be a normal load. Let me now give you an example, which is linked here, of a Spanish standard for the design of ports. This is something that is freely available on the web, so I could link it here. And it's not very recent. Let me open it. It was published in This is the English translation. It was published in 1990, so it's already 30 years old, but it is an interesting reading. You don't need to read everything, but if you look at the table of contents, you see that besides an introduction, general criteria of the project phases, something that I already discussed with you, design life, we will discuss it later. Then there is the section on actions, loads, action classification, action evaluation criteria, dynamic effects. And one interesting thing is to go at the page describing combination criteria 255. Let me go to this page. Action and load hypothesis combination criteria. And you see that here, give me 1 second that I need to answer this phone call. Sorry for that. 1 second. Here I am, sorry. Okay, now, again, you see that there is a discussion on how to estimate the safety factor, and the safety factor is something different from the concurrency factor. The safety factor is a multiplier that can be greater than 1, maybe also lower than 1 when it takes the form of a concurrency factor. And it may be higher than 1, and it allows you to take uncertainty into account. And the safety factor is generally introduced at the time of designing specifically each piece of the structure. And here it tells you how the safety factor is to be considered. And here there is the combination of actions. And there are considerations that we don't need to read because actually these are something that we already discussed. Here they are discussed in more detail. I just want to draw your attention on the third but one, the last but third one. In each accidental combination that is considered, only one accidental action shall be included in order to take into account the small probability of simultaneous action of more than one accidental load. Of course, this is valid for this specific context of these guidelines. And it's, I think, useful example of what is the indication that the guidelines can give. And you see the last one. Regarding action combinations, the seismic loads shall be considered as accidental action independently of the applied evaluation criteria. And here you have some, I move forward, you have some formulas, empirical formula for estimating the combination of loads. So each load is multiplied by a safety factor, which also include the concurrency factor. And if you read these guidelines, they give you indication on how to compute the load and how to compute these safety concurrency factors. So this again, it's a demonstration of the importance and the indications that you can get from the loads, from the guidelines or from the legislation. And of course, they are constraints, they dictate constraints, but they also give essential information for computing the loads. Let me close this. And let me now go back to the web page. Design life. This is another important parameter to be taken into account. The design life is the expected lifetime of a project. And it is extremely important because depending on the design life, you estimate the loads. If a structure is expected to last for 100 years, you have to estimate the load with a frequency of occurrence that is lower. What do I mean? If a structure is expected to be temporary and working for only 1 year, it is unlikely that in 1 year you get an extreme wave in 1 year time. If the expected lifetime is 100 years, it becomes quite likely that in 100 years you get an extreme wave. And therefore, you have to, basing on the design life, you have to perform load estimation. You have to perform, basing on the design life, the selection of the material. The durability of the material is to be designed depending on the design life. And therefore you understand that, and also the societal development, the loads depend on the societal development, and of course, if the lifespan, the expected lifespan is extended, then you have to plan more carefully the loads by figuring out what could be the possible future situation. As a rule of thumb, I give you these suggestions for defining the design life for a given type of structures. Breakwater are, these are protections of the coastline. Sometimes they are placed outside the harbors in order to mitigate the action of waves. And their expected lifetime is usually taken around 100 years. Reinforced open berth structures, 50-100. In general, I would say that the usual expected lifetime for an harbor design is between 50 and 100 years. Steel sheet pile berth structure, which means that it's a berth structure that has is in a way lighter. With respect to the reinforced open berth structures, the sheet pile berth structure are in general lighter, and therefore they have a shorter expected duration, 50 years here. Rubber fenders, 10 years. It's quite a long time. Sometimes they need to be replaced even every shorter period. And concrete aprons and roads, 20 years. So you see that indeed the maintenance should take into account that you have different lifetime, different expected lifetime for different component of the berth structure. And therefore it means that maintenance operations need to be planned carefully. What kind of berth structures can we consider? Of course, it depends on the type of port, on the type of traffic that you are expecting. There are two main categories of berths, depending on their shape, the wharfs and the piers. Let's see Let's click on these links. This is the Wharf. So I think it's the picture, the best picture is this one of these. So this is the Boston Wharf. This is a wharf. Or maybe another interesting picture is not this one, is this one. This is a typical example of a wharf. A wharf is an elongated berth which is developed along the coastline. The direction is parallel to the coastline. Good. The piers are perpendicular to the coastline. And let's look at the pictures. So these are piers. You see that the boat, when it's docked, it's perpendicular to the coastline. The longitudinal direction of the boat is perpendicular to the coastline. In a wharf, when the boat is docked, its longitudinal direction is parallel to the coastline. Let's browse the pictures. This is typically a pier, small one. Another example, this is a T-shaped pier. You may say that along the head of the T, you have the boats that are parallel to the coastline, but still this is considered to be a pier. This is another example of a pier. You see here an advantage because the beach is populated by people and the berth is docking the boats not along the beach. It would take the room from the beach and they decided to opt for this solution because it is saving the beach. This is in Brighton, England. Let's move forward. This is another example of a pier. Again, nice, this one. Again, this is a picture from 19th century. And again, this is again Brighton. This is taken from below. You see there is the beach here. It's a nice solution because it allows them to combine the two uses of the coastline. Has a pier and has a beach. This is a pier again. That's it. Let's go back. So, in terms of the structure, the berths can be classified again into two categories: the solid structure berth and the open structure berth. In the first category, you have a solid vertical structure that is created to contain fill material, which is brought from the land to the structure. And the vertical structure is built, it's used where, here there is a spelling error, it's where the depth of the sea is large enough to allow the considered ship to dock. So solid structure berth can be divided again in three main subcategories: gravity wall structure and sheet pile structures. Let me just give me 1 second. I want to correct these spelling errors because otherwise I forget. Give me 1 minute, please. We make 1 minute break and I address this because otherwise, okay. You see that I'm continuously evolving my tutorials. Okay, let me check. Okay, so it's solid structure. Let me search for it. Sorry. I am on the wrong page, just 1 second. I think it is here. Edit. Okay. Let me check because okay, land side. Because I already found 3 and then I don't remember. Solid structure. Perfect. Domain categories. Where? Very good. And then there is let me save it. Okay, I go back just 1 second to the okay. Let me just reload it. Very good. Okay, so the open, these are so the solid structure berths, and therefore let's say that these are structures that are used for more important type of ports, more important type of berths. The solid structure is more indicated when you plan to host ships that are important with large size, and therefore you need a structure that is more solid. The open structures are usually standing over piles set offshore from the natural extent of the land. Here there is a picture, and therefore they are usually used for less important situations. And they are more flexible, can be easily maintained, and what you just need is to fix piles in the bottom of the ocean in order to just sustain the berth itself, but you don't need a solid structure to give more stability. And it is also used, the open structure berth, when in order to make lighter the overall intervention and to reduce the environmental impact. What should you consider in order to select the most appropriate berth structure? One should look at the condition of the soil in correspondence of the land, but also the sea bottom. The underwater work, because if you make a solid structure, if you adopt a solid structure, you have to perform some underwater work. You have to plan some underwater work. While for an open berth structure, the underwater work is very limited. And also you have to consider the wave action. The open berth structure are offering less resistance to waves. On the other hand, they are usually more flexible and less rigid, and therefore you should carefully consider what is also the movement of these open structures when you have a consistent wave action. Because flexibility on the one hand is an advantage, on the other hand, of course, it causes it may cause some discomfort and some difficulties for the works that are related to loading and unloading ships. The equipment that you need to use, the equipment like cranes, etc. And also you have to consider the type of material you are allowed to use, because not everywhere solid structures are allowed. You have to consider the timing. What is the time that you have available to make your to materialize the Arbor, and therefore to make your project, and the construction time you have to estimate, the future extension, and the cost, of course. It is in order to address these questions, you need to make some investigation. In order to minimize the cost, it is better to avoid underwater works because they increase the construction cost and the construction time. And also keep in mind that open berth structures are normally more favorable than solid ones in respect of the reflection of incoming waves against the berth front. Reflection is important because during the docking procedures, if you have reflection of waves, maneuvering the boats becomes a little bit more demanding. And therefore, these are the conditions that you have to consider. And also, the material is important in order to reduce the cost and to mitigate the environmental impact. A proper selection is in order, and the berth structure can be constructed out of timber, steel, or concrete. And the selection depends on your needs, on your plans, and what is allowed in particular, because not everything is allowed depending on the local regulations. I want to give you some orders of magnitude for the dimension, the suggested dimension and loads for berth structures. First of all, the length. These are rules of thumb. So just take them with this meaning. So they are not prescriptions. They are just conceived in order to give you an order of magnitude. Keep in mind that orders of magnitude for an engineer are essential. You have to get an idea. As I said, at the beginning of your project, you have to get a big picture of the infrastructures and the structures that you will design. And in order to get a big picture, the orders of magnitude for their dimension, their size, is extremely important. Now, the length of berth is varying from 10 meters for a small boat in a marina to over 400 meters for large ships. This is the range. The rule of thumb is that the length of a berth should be roughly 10% longer than the longest vessel you are expected to berth there, to be moored there. So, do you have a boat that is 300 meters long? Fine, you need a berth that is at least 330 meters long. About width. The width of small docks should be at least a couple of meters. For ship length, between 10 and 20 meters, and dock length between 100 and 150 meters. But the width should be increased to, sorry, I misspelled. At least a couple of meters for ship length up to 10 meters, and length of the pier up to 100. The width should be increased to a minimum of 2.5 if the length of the ship is increased between 10 and 20 meters, and the dock length between 100 and 150. The width should be minimum 3 meters for ships and with length exceeding the above limits. When it's possible, the berth should be aligned with the dominant wind and dominant current for obvious reasons, to avoid that waves directly collide against the berth structure. In terms of structural loads, berths should be designed against a live vertical load of at least 4 kilonewton per square meters. Higher loads may result from a detailed analysis, but the rule of thumb is what is now on the screen. In terms of vertical positioning of the berth floor, meaning the vertical difference between mean sea level and floor of the berth, it is recommended to make a specific assessment which should take into account tide dynamics, type of ship, and so forth. Just 1 second, because I saw here another spelling error, which I am fixing now. Should take into account, not should. Okay. So at least 1 meter, and at least 1 meter should be adopted as vertical difference between the mean sea level and the floor of the berth. I am closing this lecture, let's say this web page. I still have to go about 20 minutes today, so I will take your patience and time for 20 minutes more. But I'm closing this web page for some considerations on the environmental impact. I already stressed that the environmental impact is an essential issue to be taken care of, and it can't be stressed enough how multifaceted, how multivariate is the environmental impact from a port on the land, sea, and air. Don't forget air, because you have cars approaching, trucks approaching, and you have also strong need for energy, which may imply that you have to generate electricity by burning fossil fuels. And you have also the emissions from the boats. They are burning a lot of fossil fuels. If you have stood for some time in a port, you for sure have realized that the quality of the air, the quality of the water, of the seawater, is not the best. And I highly suggest that you take this opportunity. I'm not sure if you are in Ravenna, but if you are there, to visit the port and look at how the port is managed. There is a lot to learn from that. And keep into account that the environmental impact is not a subjective issue. There might be regulations, local prescriptions, which you need to respect. And the environmental impact includes emission of fine dust by ships, road traffic, emission of CO2, road and rail traffic, and port activities, etc. So it is there are a lot of things that need to be considered, and in particular, you see here I am really making a short synthesis, a short summary. But you see that there are 4 categories of impacts that you need to consider: the impact by port activity itself, the impact on the sea caused by ships and human-induced pollution, the impact from emissions from transport networks, the impact induced by land use change, and in particular urban expansion, supported by the presence of the port. Of course, as I said, the presence of the port stimulates a societal development, which means a urban expansion. Local and international authorities give you, as I said, guidelines, give you legislation you have to comply with, and there are several strategies that you can adopt to reduce the environmental impact. We are not discussing them in detail here, but the use of electric cars in order to mobilize the loads, the use of information, and for trying to promote responsible behaviors by the drivers of trucks, by the drivers of cars, and also economic incentives to promote the use of clean energy, for instance, and the restoration of the sea environment. There are indeed some benefits that are offered to port authorities that take care of the restoration of the sea environment. And actually, in several cases, we found that incentives are more efficient than bans, because for obvious reasons. And above all, what you need is a comprehensive assessment of the context, of what is in the orbit of the port. As I said, when you start with your project, the preliminary assessment of all the implications is a fundamental step. I talked about energy. The port needs a lot of energy. I talked about incentives for the use of clean energy. And indeed, it's an opportunity, clean energy, because we can get energy from the sea. I think Professor Archetti mentioned to you how sea waves, the motion of sea waves can be used to get clean energy from the sea. And here there is an interesting picture of floaters that are used in order again to take energy from the movement of waves. These floaters can be installed on the platforms that were converted from the use for extracting oil to the use for generating electricity. And there is an intensive research activity on this. And therefore, I just wanted to mention this to you because this could be a kind of expertise that may be interesting to gain. Because, as I said, it's something that, in view also of the current concern of climate change, it is something that is gaining more and more attention. Now, a few words about the recovery of contaminated muds. Let me quote here from Wikipedia. The proper management of contaminated sediments is a modern day issue of significant concern. Because of a variety of maintenance activities, thousands of tons of contaminated sediments are dredged worldwide from commercial ports and other aquatic areas at high level of industrialization. Dredged material can be reused after appropriate decontamination. A variety of processes has been proposed and tested at different scales of application, technologies for environmental remediation. Once decontaminated, the material could well suit the building industry or could be used for beach nourishment. Indeed, there are examples also in Italy where the contaminated muds, once decontaminated, are used to nourish beaches or to form bricks for building constructions. And these are interesting options that can be used in order to minimize the environmental impact. Okay, with this web page we are done. So if you have any question, I'm not just updating now the date of last change. If you have any question, take this opportunity, please, to step in. Otherwise, I still have 10 minutes to go and I will introduce briefly the next topic. Okay, just 1 second. I am now checking the chat. Okay. But now I think we have 2 students, so welcome Farhan. I'm not sure what time you joined. We are basically now almost at the end of the lecture. And what I did so far, I went to my website. Just 1 second, I show you. I went to my website, to the page of Arbor Engineering, and I went through the first 3 links here. I'm not repeating what has been done, of course, but the video will be available in the playlist of Arbor Engineering, which is linked here in this web page. If you click there, it's empty, but today's video will be there. Okay, now, as I said, I have about 10 minutes to go. Let me jump to forcing estimation. Let me just make an introduction. So far, what I have been discussing has been very descriptive. And let's say that what could be what you need to study for preparing the exam. So far, I would say that only the last lecture, the last one that I discussed, so port planning and environmental impact, may give some room for asking questions. This is the lecture that I just concluded. And for instance, I may ask the student to what are examples of loads acting on a berth structure. And then the students should, with good speaking abilities, describe this figure. Or it's not necessary that the student remembers everything. It's just fine if the students demonstrate that they have a good knowledge, a good perception of what we discussed. And another thing that can be asked is design life. What is an order of magnitude of design life for berth structures? Another question may be, what are the type of berth structures that we discussed? And the students should talk about solid structure berth, open structure berth. What are the features of these two categories? And also the student could say that the solid structure may be realized with the gravity wall structure or with a sheet pile structure. Just to give you an example, I want to make sure that you know what is a sheet pile. So let me search on Google sheet pile, and here we are. These are the sheet piles. You see, they are made by metal, and for instance, if you look at here, and they are fixed into the soil. They are joined together, and with this kind of structure you can realize a berth. And for instance, let me see if we can get a sheet pile berth. Let's see. I think, yeah, I think this one is nice. Let's see. Okay, you see this picture. These are sheet piles that sustain a berth structure. And you can see here on the left a view from above. These are these sheet piles that are used and then that are then filled with solid material to build a solid berth structure. Okay. So this is something that I can ask, what type of berth structure you may consider, and so forth. Suggested dimensions. This is a very nice question. Like, can you please tell me an order of magnitude for berth structures, for different components of a berth structure? This is indeed an interesting question. Okay, so let me just now pass to forcing estimation. As I said, the content so far has been mainly descriptive. Here we get into something more technical and something that it's also more difficult to remember, because as you will see, there will be some empirical, sorry, I jumped out, some empirical relationships that we use in order to estimate forcings. And therefore it's something that will also need to be discussed between me and you in order to make clear what is what are the things that you should remember, and what are instead the relationships that you should just remember that they exist, but you shouldn't remember by memory their structure. Before we go into details next time, I just want to point you out a couple of links, and this is a kind of homework that I give to you for the next week to have a look at these links. I'm not checking anything next week, but I'm just suggesting that you learn the terminology. First of all, what is this picture? It is a mooring bollard. I didn't mention to you this term specifically. I talked about bollard forces, but the bollard is this anchor point for the boats. These terms, in order to understand each other, it's important that you know them. And there is an exhaustive glossary in the link here. You see my mouse, the hand is on a link. You go here, and here there is an exhaustive glossary of let me go to the beginning of the web page, nautical terms. So for instance, if you look for bollard, you see bollard, from boll or bowl, the round trunk of a tree, a substantial vertical pillar to which lines may be made fast, generally on the quay side rather than the ship. And if you click on bollard, you get a picture. So this page is very useful. Or another thing, let me see if they have it, ballast. Okay, very good. Ballast, heavy material that is placed in a position low in the hull to provide stability. It can be movable materials such as gravel or stones, permanently or semi-permanently installed, or integral to the hull, such as the typical lead or cast iron ballast keel of a sailing yacht. And if you click on ballast here, you get an example, the Wikipedia page, and you get an example here where the ballast is water inside a tank which is embedded into the hull. Okay. What is the hull? Sorry, nautical term. Hull. The section of a vessel above water hull. Let me see if there is the hull. I think yes, there must be the hull. Let me check. Anyway, the message, the essence of the message is, please have a look at this link for any of the term that you think you don't know exactly the meaning of. And of course, you don't have to go through the whole page because it's very long, as you see. But you may just browse a little bit in order to, here it's full, the shell and framework of the basic flotation-oriented part of a ship. You click here and you get a description, okay? Perfect, this is the first thing. Second thing, just please have a look at this sketch here, nautical terms related to ship size, and learn it, please, because this is something I can ask. So what is the beam? What is the length overall? What is the waterline length? And what is the draught or draft? What is the freeboard? And this sketch here, I think it is instructive. I think that we can stop here for today. And let me close the registration, the recording, and then stop recording.